We are continuing our series, The Road to Triumph, where Jesus is preparing his disciples for Jesus to enter Jerusalem in triumph, but also to force the powers that be to crucify him, so that he would be that sacrifice for us, to pay for all of our sins so that we would have redemption. And so, as you may remember, they weren't quite wrapping their heads around this. There are a bunch of things that, as we go through Matthew, we realize there are a bunch of things that Jesus had been saying all along, and they just weren't really getting. You watched how, as we read earlier in this text, this series, that he says, I must go to Jerusalem. I will suffer at the hands of the leaders, and I'll be crucified. And they stopped listening. They didn't hear the and be raised on the third day. That just wasn't going in. But we see again today, there's another example of how little these guys were getting, and we're awfully harsh on them. I think we're awfully harsh on the disciples for what they understood and what they didn't understand. And some of it just very simply was, remember, they hadn't received the Holy Spirit yet. And they didn't have, to be honest, let's be fair, they didn't have 2,000 years of church history behind them to inform, and a lot of people thinking about this and reading it over and over. They didn't have a Bible. Well, they had the Old Testament, but they didn't have anything, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They couldn't read how the story comes out. So I don't want to be too hard on them. But they really weren't getting much of what Jesus was telling them. And so we're going to see this here. And Have you noticed? I was reading one time, and I was reading about how filmmakers make movies, and there was a comment in there, just a simple line, that whenever you have children or animals in the storyline, they have to allot a whole bunch of extra time for retakes, and because you never know what they're going to do. You never know what they're going to do, and so it's really unpredictable what they're going to do. And so looking at Matthew 19, we're already all the ways in Matthew 19. We're getting there. We'll pick up in verse 13. Then some children were brought to him so that he might lay his hands on them and pray. And the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, let the children alone, and do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. After laying his hands on them, he departed from there. That's all we're going to look at today. But every time you invite children into a production, you have to be very careful, because who knows where they're going to go, even if you just read about them. But kids are unpredictable. Unpredictable. It's my work ethic. But they're unpredictable. You never know what they're going to do, right? And I was watching Caleb. You know little Caleb, our children's department here? And I was watching him yesterday at the wedding, and he had this spoon. You remember those of you that were there? They had these really shiny, like they're plastic, but they're really bright, shiny silver spoons. And so he's sitting in this container they had hooked onto the table, suspended between heaven and earth on the edge of this table. And he's got this little spoon, and you know how he smiles, and all you see are teeth and little squinted eyes, right, and light coming off of his little body, right? So he's got this spoon, and his eyes are crossed, and he's looking at himself, and he's changing the reflection in the spoon and just cracking up. He's having a wonderful time. And they finally, bless you, and finally, Katie said later that her husband had to leave with Caleb because he's Caleb, right? But anybody, he was doing really well. You guys that saw him, he was doing really well for being in a crowd of all these adults, and he had a little suit on with a tie. He looked quite the dapper young man. Pinstripes, power suit. They dressed him up good. Anyway, but it was at some point, there's no point trying to wrestle with a tired child. You just succumb and go take care of what they need, right? So kids can be kind of unmanageable. Kids say some really funny things. Yes? I'm sure. I just said that. There's a lot of parents here. I know one. And we could probably spend the rest of the hour just talking about the wild stuff that our kids say. Now, you've met my grandsons, right? Remember the ones that come and say, "Grandpa," right in the middle of the service, come running up front. And which I rebuke their parents, don't ever stop them from doing that again. But anyway, they say some funny things. And this last winter, it was a very cold day. It was snowing. And Joe likes to go outside and have picnics. So he's asking Mom, can we go outside and have a picnic? And Rachel says patiently, no, buddy, we can't go outside. It's snowing. It's cold. It's snowing. And he looks at it and he says, it's not snow. It's hair falling from the clouds. Wow. Is that creative or what? I want a picnic, so that's not snow. There's this little girl. I heard this from a pastor. He was an associate pastor at a church I went to many, many years ago, and he was praying with his little girl before bedtime, and she was praying about the gospel, and she was praying about how wonderful it was that she was saved. Isn't that like heartwarming? And so she prays, Jesus, thank you for making all my sins whiter than snow, whiter than clouds, whiter than socks. In your little world, right? What's really white? Socks. Yeah. Do you remember that old show, Art Linkletter? Yeah, I mean, some of you guys are way too young for this, but wow, that was like, you guys. Okay, yeah. I was going to ask about some other old shows, but no, we don't go there. So one, Anna, two, and so some of you got that, didn't you? And Geritol, remember that? Brought to you by Geritol. Okay, but Art Linkletter would ask kids, remember that Kids Say the Darndest Thing, that show, right? Yeah. And he would ask them, because, there's sitting ducks up there, and the parents know it. So the parents are trying to control from behind the scenes, right? So don't tell him about this. Don't talk about that. So, of course, what is Linkletter going to ask him? So what did your parents tell you not to talk about? He's going to do this. And so he asked this one little boy, well, Mommy told me to keep her condition a secret. And he says, I don't even know what the secret is. Every week she just keeps getting fatter and fatter. Yeah. How about this one? Mom, you were my best friend until I got actual friends. You ever played games with your kids? Little girl says, I'm not cheating. I'm just helping myself to win. Then some children were brought to him so that he might lay hands on them and pray. Wow. It says then. That ties it. Remember there's 3 rules for understanding your Bible correctly. First rule is context. Remember what the second one is? Context. Yep. So in the context here, he's just finished talking about this very ticklish subject about divorce. And he followed up with something else about celibacy, about not even ever marrying. And so he doesn't put it out there as a virtue. He just puts it out there as a gift. And some people do this because they need to do this for their ministry. But it's not talking about this is how priests should behave. But he's talking about that. So this falls right on the tail of that. And remember, just before that, he'd been talking about they were asking him, well, then who is the greatest in the kingdom? And he brings a child and stands a child in front of him. I would love to have seen that little kid's face. Hey, come here. Me? Yeah, come here. So he comes in and, Jesus is signaling this child over and stands him there. And, he's got to have his hands on him or he's hugging him or something. He's got to do that. How would you do this? Okay, guys, gather around. I want you to see this. This is really complicated. You've never seen one of these before, have you? Oh, okay, whatever. You'll get it later. And so he pulls this child in and he says, whoever becomes like this is the greatest in heaven. Right? So then we go down to this sequence of what he's talking about to prepare them, because in part he's preparing them for ministry. In part he's preparing them to see how Jesus sees the world. because they're never going to understand the cross if they don't understand this. Whoa. They're never going to understand the cross if they don't understand this. And they don't yet. Then some children were brought to him so that he might lay his hands on them and pray. Now, you know the profile. Noisy, wiggly kids. They make messes and they generally act impulsively. They intrude when they want to. They ask unpolished questions. They need to go potty just when the conversation's getting good. Right? Well, you guys just shut down in a big hurry here, didn't you? It just got really quiet. Whoa, I remember those days. I remember... Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going there at all. But they're kind of always an interruption, and they're always something that they need some kind of attention. And they have no rank in society. They really have no power, and in that particular society, in that particular place, where child mortality rate was tragically high, frighteningly high, children were replaceable. I mean, how else could it be, right? How else could it be? And so they were viewed a bit different than we view them. They weren't viewed through the lens of their potential. We have all these really pretty slogans on the wall, about children and their potential, and we need to see them as we should, right? We need to see them as our kids are actually the future. It's something about be nice how you raise your kids because they'll be picking out the nursing home, right? And it's right next to the other bumper sticker that insanity is hereditary. You get it from your kids, so it's right. It's there. And that next to the one on my car that I know why some species consume their young. I get it. I get it. So now you wonder how many kids I really had, don't you? Yeah. So do they. So we don't view them through the lens of the fullness of their humanity as walking, talking, growing examples of the glory of God on the hoof. We don't see them in that image. We see them as kids, as a responsibility, as a bother. Some of us see them as just terribly precious. I like what these parents are doing. It says some children were brought to him. So who brought them? The parents. It has to be the parents, right? And, it's not like there's some kind of a bus that, a school program. The Children to Jesus bus. It's not. They're not doing this. They're still not doing this. And so parents were bringing these children to Christ, and I think it's really interesting that they love these kids, even though in their day and age, I don't think that they love those children. I can't imagine that they love these children any less than we do. In fact, they were in close proximity to them all the time, more than we are, and I wonder if sometimes they valued their kids a little higher than we do. We find ways to manage them. We find ways to send them to holding bins that take care of them. We put them on that big yellow box thing that takes them off to who knows what they're experiencing all day long, and then they come home. And they didn't have that. I kind of wonder if in some ways they didn't have an advantage. But I'm just wondering. But parents should bring their children to Jesus. They should. And we should allow them to grow up with us helping them make up their mind. Do you think the world is helping them to just go along and make up their own mind? Do you think that? And I kind of wonder where this idea came from that, I think I should just allow my children to make up their own mind about what they believe. The Epic Times published an article just a couple of weeks ago that I thought was absolutely chilling about how the transgender movement is actively targeting young girls because they want to, first of all, they want to separate them from, I think really from their fathers because they want to talk about toxic masculinity and they want to talk about dominant males. And so it's better for you to be a male. And so they have this very subtle, very sneaky way to fool them into believing that, well, maybe I'm not a girl after all. We know that there are some very ferocious software things, viruses really, that out there that hunt our kids to get them involved with pornography. They're targeting children. It's evil. It's exactly what this is. It's all evil. They hate the children because the devil comes, he's a thief, right? He comes to steal and kill and destroy. And if you think that he's going to stop at the adults, oh no, and feel sorry for children? Really? It's time to wake up. Get some coffee, shake it off, because this is vicious. So children should be brought to Christ by their parents. They really should. And you know what happens next? Then some children were brought to him so that he might lay his hands on them and pray. So far, so good. But the next line is what? And the disciples rebuked them. My comment on that is, really? Really? Look at Matthew 18, just a couple verses up. Matthew 18, we'll pick up verse 2. Now, this may have been hours or days before, but it was really recent. 18:1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and said, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And he called a what? A child to himself and said to him, and set him before them and said, I'd love to see that kid's eyes. Truly, I say to you, unless you are converted and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. For whoever then humbles himself as this child, he is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives such a child in my name receives me. And whoever causes one of these little ones to believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of its stumbling blocks, for it is inevitable that stumbling blocks will come. But woe to that man through whom the stumbling block comes. This is terrifying. Drop down to verse 12. What do you think? If any man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on them? I love the way King James, 90 and 9. So poetic. The 99 on the mountains and go and search for the one that is straying. If it turns out he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than the 99 which had not gone astray. So it is the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones perish. Weren't they listening? I really don't know what their motivation is. Go back to Matthew 11. Famous verses. Some of you have this memorized. Matthew 11, verse 27. They'd heard this months, if not years before, year or two before. He says, all things have been handed over to me by, Matthew 11, verse 27. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, nor does anyone know the Father except the Son. And here's what I want you to pick up. And anyone to whom the Son wills to reveal him. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Come to me. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me, and he will reveal the Father to you. Amazing, simple statement. Come to me. Look at Isaiah 55. I'll probably beat you there because I have a page mark. But Isaiah 55, verse 1. There's this old Bible song, it's an old scripture song. Remember back in the days when we used to have scripture songs and we just sing those? I love those old songs. This is one of them, and I can't read this verse without hearing the tune. But it says, Ho, everyone who thirsts. What's the next word? Come. Come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why do you spend money on what is not bread and your wages for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good and delight yourself in abundance. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen that you may live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you according to the faithful mercies shown to David. Come to me. These men knew Isaiah. They knew what Jesus had said in Matthew 11. They knew these verses. They'd heard him. They knew it better than we do. They'd heard him. They were standing there. But maybe in the fog of all the busyness, these things kind of got shuffled away or confused. I don't know. But I do know this, that when you tell a child that I don't have time for you, what's the message? You're not worth it. You don't matter. I don't really love you. So is there much of a different message when the disciples try to shoo these children and probably the parents away? Stop bringing these kids in here. Get these kids out of here. Don't you know that Jesus, busy man. Things to do, places to go. Busy man. Busy. He's got to go to Jerusalem. We're scaring us to death with this. But, he's just talking about celibacy. You can see this as a celibate man. He doesn't have time for kids. What did they just tell those children? This representative of God isn't really interested in you. Doesn't have time for you. And your parents were wrong. Wow. Now, we beat the disciples up pretty easy. One, they're not here to defend themselves. Unfortunately, I think I could see myself doing what they did. Can you? I can. We're busy. We don't really have time for kids. To take the children over there, where they're wiggly and unpredictable and messiness and funny smells can just be over there, okay? I think we've done that. But the message coming from the parents, though, I think they're right on. It's a huge compliment. It's a huge compliment for these parents to bring these children to see Jesus. Why were they doing that? Who is this Jesus anyway? Jesus he wasn't an elected official. He wasn't part of the aristocracy. He didn't have wealth. He didn't own property. Who was this guy? He just showed up and he had authority. And he healed people. And he said the most amazing, uncanny things. And they had this ring of reality to them, to those people that recognized it, that it resonated with them, and they wanted to hear more of what this Jesus had to say. And those that were interested in power and control, it was resonating with them, and it scared them. And so they had to find ways to destroy him. So Jesus had this authority, he had this power, he had this ring of truth about him. He had this compassion. You've seen his compassion. Remember he came down from the Sermon on the Mount, his master class. Remember who the first person was that he met? Do you remember? The leper. And the leper said, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And do you remember what Jesus did? Remember what Jesus did? Did he heal him? But first, he touched him first. Because that man needed to know that in his worst estate, his worst condition, Jesus loved him enough to touch him when he was still contagious, when he was still dangerous. That's how Jesus loved them. And he loved all kinds of people. All kinds of people. The woman at the well, she was a smart cookie. Can I call her that? Is that politically correct? She was a smart cookie. And she enters into this rather symbolic kind of philosophical discussion with him. And she's really impressed with Jesus. And finally he calls her out and says, go get your husband. I don't have a husband. That's right. You've had 4 guys, and whoever you're living with now is not your husband. I don't know if that means it was somebody else's husband. Maybe it kind of sounds like it. I don't know. But either way, she'd given up on that. She wasn't married. But he's the one. He told her about living water. In her worst condition, seeing right through it. Jesus has this amazing compassion. So all these stories. The woman caught in adultery. Where's the guy? How did they catch her? Where's the guy? How did they know? Where's the guy? I'll tell you where he is. He's down some alley pulling his pants back on. And he's running to catch up because he's one of them. Go find him. He's the one that should be standing in front of him. But he's not. And I love that you've heard me tell this story. I love this story. Moses said we should stone such a one. She's caught in the act, the very act. What do you say? They thought they were going to get to stone somebody. But remember, Jesus saves. There's no place on the planet she could have been safer than where they took her, thinking that they were going to get to kill her. Idiots. It's a theological term. It means a unique person with particular attributes. Yeah, it's the Dave Lucer translation. And so the message that parents are giving these kids is, you are very important to us, and we want to take you to this very important person. And we want him to bless you. We want him to be the one who puts his hands on you. And we'll talk about that in a second. But everyone wants their children to do well. The parents understood what was going on here. They wanted their kids in a very difficult place where a lot of kids never made it to adulthood. They wanted their kids to be blessed by this teacher, by this one that people were whispering that this is the Messiah. And everybody wants their children to do well. I want to pause that for just a second. That visitors will bring their children to us. They will, and they should. They do, and they will. And unfortunately, where we are right now, we are not in a place where we can really attend to their needs. One Orthodox priest once said that no church should be without the holy noise of children. Gosh, I love that quote. Yeah. No church should be without the holy noise of children. And amen. And we need to have this. So we are praying very concretely that we can get our hands on another location, about what we're waiting to hear back from in this site across the parking lot here, that might be a much better site for us. We could build some classrooms in this space, and we could have lots of holy noise all over the building, with impertinent, noisy, wiggly children who don't really know how to behave yet, but that's okay. But they come in washed, and they'll learn to be polite as we go along. But we have to honor and trust. We have to honor and trust God with this, and we have to bless those children with Jesus. We must not view children's ministry as babysitting. It is not babysitting. Our commission is to make disciples. So it has to be evangelism, it has to be teaching, it has to be prayer, it has to be love and affection. We want kids that will just love coming here. Kids that come and look like some of you gentlemen, that they've been loved so hard they hardly have any hair left on their heads. Right? Probably shouldn't have said that. Just lost half the congregation. So should have said that either. The disciples... The disciples must have thought that this Jesus the Messiah, the Son of the living God, was too important to be bothered by these noisy ragamuffin children. But they hadn't absorbed what Jesus had been telling them yet about greatness. Greatness in the kingdom is taking off your vaunted, august persona and getting down with people who cannot save themselves, who cannot help. That's greatness. They have nothing to offer you. This is greatness, because this is what Jesus did for us. And I know pastors, I know these guys, that they're too important to be with children. They have too many important business things to do. They're just much too busy running this big organization. Brothers and sisters, if we get to a place where we are so important and so busy that we don't have time to slow down and be with some kids, then we've lost our way. We have lost our way. I met these guys. They were too busy, too important to do weddings. That needed to be farmed off to the lesser pastors on staff. They were too busy to do funerals. Are you kidding me? And the one that really rankled me, and I hope you hear how I'm still angry about this. I'm too busy. I don't really have time to do baptisms. I don't really enjoy doing baptisms. Yeah. That's virtually word for word. Then what on earth are we doing here? What is this about? Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them all that I have taught you. And lo, I am with you, even to the end of the earth. If we are too busy for those things, then we've lost our way. It's not just that we're too busy. We'll always be too busy. We've lost our way. Boy, that rankles me. But I will tell you this. Well, Dave, then why don't you work with kids very well? Because they scare me. The thing about children is they are so emotionally present. This is why they're so intense. They're right there with you all the time. They know what they're for, And I remember James Dobson one time. James Dobson did this. He was involved in some research, and at least he brought the research out. There's some big research about how long children, like 5 years and under, what their attention span is. So they did all this big research project. Like, is this really hard? You could have asked any busy mom, right? You could have, or a kindergarten teacher. You really want to know? Ask one of them. They'll tell you. But they had this big research project, and they discovered that children 5 and younger have an attention span of about 30 seconds. And that's why you're talking to them, play with them. They just kind of wander off and go do something, right? I'm kind of done, and off they go. So then the same people decided, well, let's find out then what is the attention span of an average adult. And they found that the average adult's attention is about 30 seconds. The difference is the adult will continue to look at you. They aren't there anymore. The kid is at least smart enough to wander off. I know what that is. I'm going to go play. Wow. And so this is why children scare me, because they're so real, and I don't know what to do with them. So it's lack of skill, and it's just because I'm a coward. And so these kids are so precious. And I admire my wife Kathy so much. I don't know if you have had an opportunity to see her with children. Greatness on hands and knees with these little souls. And they're eating out of her hand. I'm worried if I'm going to come back with all my fingers. And so... But we can't be too important. And so the big reason I want to move over there is not so that we can have a bigger show. I couldn't care less about the show. I think that's irrelevant. I think it's also a unique thing with unique attributes. But I think what we really need to have is honest connection with God. So we're always going to strive for that. It's part of our philosophy ministry here. We're always going to have that. But we need to have a place where we can reach children too. And we don't have that. So please, labor in prayer so we can have a space for children. We have people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and jump in. Thank you all very much. And I think we've got some very gifted people. We've got to have a space, okay? We've got to have a space. So pray for this, because people will bring their children to us. It's happened. And we need to be able to take them to Jesus. And not give them the message like, well, we just sort of took care of them for the hour, and that's the wrong message to send. Okay? I hear that amen. That's great. Okay. Look at Philippians chapter 2. Going all over the Bible today. It's what I get when I have too much time in the Bible. So Philippians chapter 2. Now remember, we were talking when Jesus was talking about greatness in the kingdom. and that we divest ourselves of what we think are the trappings of our power and authority and our importance. Remember when Jesus in the upper room took his cloak off, and what did he go do? Do you remember this? He washed their feet. And then when he was done with that, and they were like shocked that he did this. He scandalized those men. And then he went and he sat down with them again. And he said, "Do you know what I did to you?" And they didn't know how to answer. I don't think they got it. He explained it to them. But then he said, "You have to do this too. You're going to wash each other's feet." That's greatness. And so in Philippians chapter 2, we see in verse 5, "Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped." Now, don't choke on that verse, because there's people that think, well, see, Jesus wasn't really God because it says he wasn't equal. That's not what he's talking about here. He existed in the form of God. There is only one being that exists in the form of God, and that is God. And so rather than demand his rights, he set those rights aside. God incarnated as a real man. Always God, forever God. Not created, will never come to an end. Eternally God became a man. And so he could stand in our place before the Father as a priest and as a sacrifice and give himself for us. And so he let go all of those rights. He didn't demand it. That's why he says in the next verse, "But emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance of a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. For this reason," hear the greatness, "God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, that the name of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." Now, I don't want to get lost in the greatness of it. I have to read those verses because I just have to. It's compulsive now. And so, amen, thank you. And so, what we're really seeing here is Jesus emptied himself. He divested himself of his appearance as God, his authority as God. He laid that aside, and he became dependent upon the Holy Spirit and his Father, just as we are too. And so with that then, he was able to put himself in our place, demonstrate how to walk by faith in dependence upon the Father, and then he was also that perfect sacrifice. Is it such a step that he could step down to be like that for you and for me? Is it that much farther to take that step and be like that for children? It's just not. It's the very same step, isn't it? It's the very same step. There's no difference. And so he did this. But Jesus said, verse 14, back to Matthew 18, or 19, excuse me. But Jesus said, "Let the children alone, and do not hinder them from coming to me." Get a load of this. "For the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Jesus was only angry a few times, and I think this is one of them. Mark's gospel, chapter 10, says that he was indignant that they were doing this. Indignant. I had to look indignant up. I kind of knew what it meant. Do you know what indignant meant? I kind of knew what it meant. But when it came up to me, I'd say, yeah, me neither, yeah. And so it means that you're angry, you're annoyed, you're irritated at having been treated unjustly. Oh. He's indignant not for himself. He's indignant for them. What are you doing? But Jesus said, "Let the children alone. Do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." And so he was angry when he cleansed the temple as an example. He was angry here. He was angry because people were not allowed to come access him. He was angry with men who so misunderstood him as to think that he would not be willing to welcome a child. The kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And Jesus' words right there should roll over us like thunder. See, I thought the kingdom of heaven was God's dwelling. So it belongs to him, right? It's his kingdom. Kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God, right? Those are interchangeable terms. They are. So it's God's place. It's his castle. It belongs to him, right? But he just told us it belongs to these children. Whoa. How do we bring that together? He said that this kingdom belongs to these disorganized, unsuspecting, impertinent children, cross-eyed, looking at their reflection in a spoon. This is who it belongs to. See, people that have simple, childlike faith inherit the kingdom of heaven. Remember in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is what? Kingdom of heaven. These people that recognize they have no power, they have no strength, they have no authority, they have no standing. It's theirs. We come to him empty-handed, just as empty-handed as any child comes to you. And it's their need that they be lifted up by someone else who has that. And we come to him empty-handed. As a matter of fact, looked at that real quick. This is just an amazing thing. Where am I? Yes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, that can be translated also meek, and it's those who are submissive, those who go along with what God's program is. For they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Have you ever had a child ask you for a snack? And if you're looking at God and, I wish I was a better man, can you make me a better man? What is God going to do? For where he is in heaven, where he is in greatness and creation and holiness and purity, all you're asking him for is a snack. It's no trouble. He can do this. For they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers. The greatness here. Hear that. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They own it. Because as far as God is concerned, if you inherit the kingdom, it's yours. If you are there by his invite, it's yours. He opens up his house. What's mine is yours. How do you say it in Spanish? Mi casa es su casa? Is that what you say? Yeah. I don't speak Spanish. Do we have an interpretation? It's the best I got. I don't know what I said. Anyway, after legs, but this is his place. You are present with me here. You have freedom, full run of the kingdom. It's all yours. In Romans 8 it talks about, if he's given you his son, will he not with him give you all things? It really is yours. Yes, it's his, but he gives it to you. Wow. This kingdom belongs to those such as them. And I love the next part. After laying his hands on them, he departed from there. Now look at Mark chapter 10. Mark chapter 10, we'll pick up verse 13. This is great. It's the very same event. It's just a little bit different perspective because Matthew's gospel is presenting Jesus as who? Do you remember? Jesus is the king, right? The king, Messiah. But he shows him as the king, and if he's the king, then he's Messiah. Yes, exactly right. And Mark, he's presented as what? The servant. The servant of God, okay? So you pick up verse 13. And he says, and they were bringing children to him so that he might touch them. But his disciples rebuked them. And when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, permit the children to come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child will not enter it at all. And I love the next verse. And he took them in his arms and began blessing them and laying his hands on them. You know, I don't really know what bless means. I don't really know. Where was it in my notes? I had a good wedding yesterday. But when someone was brought to have hands laid on them, see, this is, I think, why we see the laying on of hands in Matthew and not the embracing, because he's emphasizing the kingly role here. So this is Matthew's agenda, and it's legitimate. It's a good agenda. But when you bless somebody, when you lay your hands on them, is you're giving to them, you're laying upon, transferring to them that they are accepted by you, that they are going in some cases when the apostles were laying hands on someone and commissioning them and sending them out, that they were going out in the authority that they had from Christ. And so they're part of the team now. But it also has the idea that if you need something, come to me. That's part of the blessing. And so these parents are bringing Jesus these children so that he will lay hands on them for that reason. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, right? This is so consistent. It's so consistent. And so what they're asking Jesus to do is accept them into his approval, into his support, into his circle. Are you with me? So this is what it means to bless a child or bless anybody by laying hands on them. This is what they're asking of him. And so he does this. So laying on of hands is a gesture of acceptance and approval. And so what's the message these parents are giving these children by taking them to this important Jesus who seems to know something about God that nobody else knows, who seems to be the Messiah? The message is, I love you. The message is, you're so important. I'm going to make sure you get plugged in to the good guys here. Do you see it? So that's why they're doing this. And so their laying hands is a gesture of acceptance and approval and future support. And so I think this has something to do with this idea of shalom. The difference between our idea of peace and the Hebrew idea of shalom is peace. We think of peace in a Greek idea that it's tranquil, everything's calm, everything's still, right? And we like that. That's why sometimes we want our children to be in the other room. I remember hearing about this harried mother. She had a bunch of little toddlers, stair-step kids like that. And she just wanted 5 minutes to go to the bathroom. Just 5 minutes to go to the bathroom. And so she gets them all out on the other side of the door and latches the door. She had to lock it. And she's sitting there on the toilet. Sorry for the image. And she looks over, and under the door she sees little fingers coming under the door. See, we have this idea of wanting tranquility and peace and quiet. Shalom is the idea that everything is as it should be. All the pieces running together as they should. Like an engine with, all the, you guys get this. Have you ever been to the air races and heard those Merlin, 12-cylinder engines, those Rolls-Royce things? There is a sound out of that engine like nothing else. And those guys have those engines purring. It's a beautiful sound, right? Amen? Okay. And so that's the idea of shalom. And so they're bringing these kids to Jesus so he can lay his hands on them so that everything will be as it should be in their lives. What does that tell those kids? We love you. We can't give this to you, but we'll make sure you get it. I would speculate then, I don't know this, so I'm guessing, okay? This is Dave, not the Bible. I would speculate that those children came to believe in Jesus soon after the resurrection. I don't think that's an outrageous assumption. And I'm guessing then, because they were young, that they would have been founding members of that early church. Wow. At least some of them were, because we know the gospel went through that society and thousands of people came to Christ. It's got to be some of the parents and those children, because what they're going to remember is mom and dad brought us to see this Jesus, this teacher. And I don't really remember what he said, but you know what he did? We were just kind of standing there, and he just reached out and put his arms around us, just hugged us. He just hugged us and it felt so good. You know what it's like to get a hug when you need one. When you're hugged by somebody that's really hugging you, because that's as close to their heart as they can get. You know what that is. And that's what they've experienced at the hands of Jesus. So I don't know what all these other leaders have to say, but all I know is that man hugged me and he loved me. I felt it. I was there. It's hard for me to believe that those kids wouldn't have been lining up to believe in him. And then some of those kids would have been probably ferocious men for Christ. So, but isn't that what happened to you? At some point you realize Jesus loves you, just you. And somehow you got that moment where he put his arms around you and you believed. I remember that moment, 1975, sometime in August. And I remember realizing Jesus died for me on the cross, that he had to do that. He died for me on the cross. And at that moment, I understood he loved me. I didn't understand it very well. There were a lot of things that I was confused about. It took a long time to grow. But I got it right there. And somehow that was so personal. It wasn't just for everybody. It was. But it was for me. Do you understand what I'm talking about? And so that's when Jesus laid that affectionate touch on you, that moment that you knew that God loved you, you were never the same again. And after affectionately laying hands on them, he departed from there. After laying his hands on them, he departed. And he started to take those steps closer to the walls of Jerusalem and the cross. Someone should write a song about that. Hugging those children and going to give himself for you and for me. As such, the kingdom of heaven belongs to them, those people that he embraced. And he walked to the cross. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this simple message of wiggly children, so unpredictable and impertinent and out of control and messy and smelly, but precious, precious beyond description. And Lord, I ask that you will raise up in this church the ability to help those kids. They are children being victimized by the world, and we need to be equipped in order to help them. Please give us a better space so we can open our doors and welcome children. And we thank you for this in Jesus' precious name, and we thank you for the loving embrace you gave each one of us so that we would know that you loved us and we would never be the same again. And it's his precious name we pray. Amen. Kathy, did you have something you want to say?
I was going to say there is a statue in on the table in the children's department, and each week I have the children visualize and pick out which child they are around Jesus, and that Jesus loves them. So I just encourage you to picture yourself as a child by Jesus, and which one are you?
Would you go get it and set it right here? This is not an idol, okay? It's just a statue. But it's a beautiful little statue. She's had it for years. Just simple. Yeah. That's what happened that day. Well, I will love to see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you all for coming, and we will see you next time.